Hi, everybody. Welcome to Noticing Poetry and the iNotice method. And I'm Scott Slaby, educator, poet, and author. And I'm here to break down for you. If your teacher has assigned you a poem that you need to write about and you need to have something to say about it, where do you start? And this video is going to help you and maybe even help your teachers a little bit understand how to use the iNotice method and Noticing Poetry unit plans techniques to help you begin a written response if you need it. Or you could do it with an oral response. But the whole goal here is how do you move from noticing what's there to coming up with a thesis or some kind of main argument that you're going to make about a poem. And here's the deal. This is my 20th year teaching, and I have been working on iNotice and Noticing Poetry method for a very long time. And every time I go through and teach students about poetry, the same thing comes up. They rush to make kind of inferences and try to get to something deep. Whereas in reality, if you focus on the literal, you're actually going to end up seeing way more, noticing way more, and actually having way more to say when you engage with poems, or write for that matter, when you engage with poems. So I hope to help you here, and let's go forward and give this a try. Okay, so I'm just going to review a couple of things first with Noticing Poetry and the iNotice method. Noticing Poetry, the unit plan at the Academy of American Poets, and the iNotice method rely on this idea that there are only 4 things that you need to notice in a poem. It's the ideas, which is called the ideational level. There's the visual aspects of the poem, the typography, which is we call the visual level. There are the sounds in the poem, like the rhymes, the alliteration, any repetition of sounds, and also meter if you're looking at formal verse, or if you're looking at poems written in prose, which is unmetered language, then you're probably still going to have something called a prose rhythm. And that's really established by the sentence. That's the order of the words. And so that's also a sonic device. And then you have the sensory level. With sensory level, think of it as anything that creates a word picture in your head. So all of those literary devices like metaphor, personification, anything that creates an image, a word picture, if you will, belongs in the sensory level. And everything that you look at can be broken down into these 4 levels. Ideas it's all about the literal meaning of words. And that's what we're going to focus on today, because the ideational level, believe it or not, I think is the most important level when you're engaging with poetry and trying to build your confidence and increase your competencies in noticing what's there. So this is basically a little chart that I've come up with. I was teaching high school for 19 years, and this past year I've had the great opportunity to teach 7th and 8th grade. And as I was teaching my 8th graders, we're doing this poetry unit. I'm like, I need to break this down into a visual that makes sense. So think about it this way. If you start with the title, and you literally sit into what the ideas are with the title and how those ideas move across the poem, you're going to see that the visual level, the sonic level, the sensory level are all there kind of working with the ideas, leading ultimately to the poem's sentence. And that is the experience, okay? Broken down in a kind of theoretical framework, if you will. But if you take a look at this, and if you practice what I'm going to show you, you will be able then to make substantive arguments and ideas about poems. All right, so you're ready to go forward. Let's go. So I'm going to use this example, this poem from Linda Paston, To a Daughter Leaving Home. And I'm going to use it because I think it's structured in such a way as to represent a lot of the things that I'm talking about. It's a pretty accessible poem. One of my main points is that I think a great way to learn is to start with poems that are accessible and that have a lot more going on than you probably initially realize. And so we're not going to rush to being deep or anything, but what we're going to do is literally look at what's there and notice what's there in order to organically get us to some kind of argument that we want to make. So let's start here. It's called To a Daughter Leaving Home by Linda Passon, and I'll read it for you. When I taught you at 8 to ride a bicycle, loping along beside you as you wobbled away on 2 round wheels, my own mouth rounding in surprise when you pulled ahead down the curved path of the park, I kept waiting for the thud of your crash as I sprinted to catch up, while you grew smaller, more breakable with distance, pumping for your life, screaming with laughter, the hair flapping behind you like a handkerchief waving goodbye. All right, I apologize for not reading that terribly well, but you get the idea, right? So if we go forward and we look at literally what the title indicates first, you have a parent sending this thing, this construction, this poem or this message to his or her daughter. Okay? Literally what's there. Now I look at the grammatical units, the largest ones here, and it looks like we have a dependent clause followed by an independent one, making one big long sentence. There's a little more than there. It might be multiple clauses there, but you get the idea. We could break this into the main dependent and independent clause. Okay? And so in the first one, when I taught you to ride a bicycle, we have a speaker taught their daughter to ride a bike and is surprised at how she goes, right? And how she moves forward. That's basically the dependent clause. Afterwards, we have the speaker saying that she kept waiting for her daughter to fall so she could help her if she needed to. And the daughter is feeling very happy at this and exhilarated by it because she's screaming with laughter. But the attitude of the parent is still very protective. Okay, and that's it. That's what happens in the poem. Okay? So if we start looking at, that's it. That's literally what the poem says. That's literally what it says. Now, if we look at how it's being said, this is where things become a little different. We start looking at how the ideas unfold visually, sonically, and from an image-based standpoint. You have what I did is I color-coded them, and I used blue for sounds, green for sensory level, meaning the images, and yellow for the visual aspects of the poem, which include line breaks. Okay? So there are things going on here, even if you don't know the names of these things. In order to kind of get at this larger idea, it's okay. You notice, the more you notice, the more you can draw relationships with what the literal stuff says. So if you notice here, taught and 8, there's a sonic thing going on, so you might need to mark that. Or path of the park, hey, you're like alliteration, that's awesome. You can highlight that. There are also other vowel links and other kind of repetition like pumping. You've got lots of different things going on here. So the sonic level, the sensory level, and the visual level are all unfolding beginning to end. And I just need you to mark that next. What do you notice? Notice as much as you can. Okay, so now that we've finished noticing as much as we can here, if we go on and we start to say, well, what's the relationship of some of these things to the poem? We start to look at, we have the speaker who's a parent who's watching their child go. A speaker feels one way, maybe worried about their child, but the child doesn't feel that way. The child is exhilarated, screaming with laughter, hair flapping behind her like a handkerchief waving goodbye. We've got that simile in the end. Now we can start to put things together. Now we can start to say, from a visual level, sensory level, sonic level. How does that connect to these ideas? And what we might say, maybe we come up with an idea, and that says, well, this parent, it says to a daughter leaving home. The parent's surprised, the parent's worried. You know that because she says her kid's more breakable with distance. And that there's a big divide between the two of them. So because it's written from the parent's perspective, you have this kind of great sadness, right? That of watching your child, this bittersweet thing of watching your child go away and exert independence. That's also a very proud moment, though, because all of the words there that we could look at kind of cue us into that, because the daughter is not afraid. The daughter's not afraid at all. It's the parent is struggling with these emotions. So when the great sadness of watching a child leave a parent's care is kind of matched by the pride or the joy of watching a child kind of just go off and live life independently, as children are meant to do, as you're meant to do. Right? You're meant to break away from your parents someday. And your parents kind of know that, and they don't want to realize that. And sorry, parents, if you're watching this out there, it's true. I have a daughter in university right now, and there's that moment, right? When the child leaves the nest, right? So that's what we have here. That's where we're going. Now, you're like, Mr. Slaby, you promised me. You said to me that we would get to this. How does this help me make a big idea? Well, if you look at this here, move this down again. What practical use is there for me in this? You see that last thing that I wrote? I guess it would be down there, right? Last thing that I wrote down there about that's coming to that poem's sentence. See that thing down there at the bottom where the ideas, the literal ideas, and all of the different levels are kind of culminating in this bigger idea of getting at that difficulty that sometimes parents have? Well, if we know that to be the case, what we can do is we can build toward a thesis, right? And we can say, maybe we can revise it, and maybe we say this. Maybe we say, in Linda Paston's poem, To a Daughter Leaving Home, the repetition of sounds as well as the surprising images and line breaks reinforce the idea that the great sadness of watching one's child leave a parent's care is only matched by the pride and joy of watching that child exert her independence. So, it's not a perfect thesis, but it's a starting place. It's a place where we can begin shaping our argument and talking about how the ideas progress across the poem and how they shift from the dependent clause to the independent one, how it moves from this reminiscence to this divide in the end. And we've got a place to make that argument. Okay? We now know where we can start. So basically, ladies and gentlemen, if you're struggling with how to get to that thesis, how to get to that point, get literal. I can't stress it enough. If you get literal with what the ideas are and accept them, and then look at how the visual, sensory, and sonic elements are working along with that and helping the poem move from one place to another, you're going to be better off. Thanks for tuning in. If you like this, if you found it helpful, please subscribe to the YouTube channel or head over to my blog at thesis.wordpress.com. You can also check out the Noticing Poetry unit plan at the Academy of American Poets. Take care.